Alright, it's time to talk about Siren Season 2, and I'm gonna give you a spoiler warning. This was a long season of TV, 16 episodes with a big old break in the middle, so there was a lot of shit that went down here. So if you have not watched the finale of Siren Season 2 and plan on it, I recommend not watching this, because it'll ruin it for you. If you don't care about Siren and just like watching me talk, well, welcome. I'm flattered. Alright, let's go. Siren Season 2. So yeah, Season 2 of Siren has just wrapped up on Freeform, and I got a lot to say about it. If you recall, I got into this show kinda late. It was when Season 2 was about to start. I quickly watched Season 1 and I made a video on it, because I thought it was pretty rad. So I was pretty excited for Season 2. And ultimately, in this season, there were things I liked and things I was not a huge fan of. Like I said, this was a pretty long season. 16 episodes divided by like a 3-month gap. That's crazy. It went from like January to March, and then stopped and started again in June, and went until yesterday. So really the season is like divided into halves. The first half of this season is actually pretty straightforward. This big company Klesko is drilling into the ocean looking for oil, and they're mapping out the underwater terrain using seismic charges. You know, you've seen Kong Skull Island, you know how it works. The inhabitants don't usually like that. So these big sonic booms underwater scare the mermaids back onto the land. So Rin comes back and brings a few friends with her. So now we have some new merfolk to deal with, including a couple of the ones from the end of Season 1. So really the first half of Season 2 is these new merfolk getting adjusted to human society like Rin did in Season 1, and also stop this big company from drilling for oil. Now I gotta be honest, after this whole season wrapped up, I gotta say I liked this first half more than the second half, because it was more straightforward. I like watching these new mer characters adjusting to human society, Rin kind of showing them the ropes as best she can. That Katrina though, she is a right piece of work, I'll tell you that. She was the leader of their pack before Rin took over at the end of Season 1. Now she pretty much wants revenge. There were quite a few points in the first half of the season where I was like, damn, she is bitter, she's just mean. Another one of these new mer characters is Cammy, who is actually Donna's daughter. You know, Donna who was killed at the end of Season 1. So you feel bad for Cammy, you know, she misses her mother. So the divide among the mer people ranks comes from the fact that a human killed Donna, you know, Xander. Katrina uses that fact to turn Cammy against Rin. Katrina's pretty much like, Rin, you are more like the humans than you are like us at this point. And I was like, this is some Dawn of the Planet of the Apes shit. Katrina is Koba, who hates the humans, and Rin is Caesar, who just wants them all to get along. That's just the parallel I made. Oh, and also we have Nicole. Nicole shows up episode 1 of this season, and pretty much throws herself at Xander. So those two start hooking up, and off the bat, I was like, there's something not right about this. You can tell she's smarter than she seems at first. I was just like, what's her real agenda here? Turns out, yeah, she's in cahoots with the military, which actually feeds more into the second half of the season. One big thing the show touches on, though, is something I've never really seen before in any mainstream media, and that is the concept of polyamory. As in, yeah, three-way relationship. Now, I kinda saw it coming since in Season 1, you know, there were hints that were dropped, but just a few episodes into this new season, it just goes for it. The show's like, yeah, we're doing this. A couple different thoughts went through my head when this happened. One of them was, that is the luckiest guy in the world. But the main thought I had was that this is not... I mean, it's not that I didn't like it, but for me personally, watching it just kind of felt weird. Like, I understand that polyamory is a thing that exists. I mean, it's rare, but I'm sure it's out there. I'm sure there are plenty of polyamorous relationships in this very country and countries around the world right now. And I'm not against it or anything, you do you. I'm just saying it's not something I'm used to watching, and it kind of caught me off guard a little bit. Like, how long are these bedroom scenes gonna be? I mean, they're just making out with each other, they got their hands all over each other, and I'm just like, alright, I get it. Can we move on? If I wanted to watch a porno, I'd watch a porno. But it does ultimately work for the story of the show. And at the end of the first half, they cause this accident at the oil rig. The big tower falls over and Xander's ship blows up and gets destroyed, and that leads into the second half. And the reason I like the first half better than the second half is because the second half was a lot more complex. I just found that there were a lot of things going on, a lot of cogs turning. Like Helen meets her distant relatives, which leads her to Beth and her crazy group of radicals. Like they're all just a bunch of hybrids, these, you know, half or whatever mermaid people, who are like these religious nuts. Like they bow their heads to Rin when she shows up. They're saying prayers. I'm like, all right, these guys are almost giving me a Get Out vibe, especially Beth. She just had a creepy vibe about her. And you also have Ben's mom, Elaine, and her declining health. So ultimately the big thing is the military wants to use mermaids' regenerative stem cells to maybe be used in modern medicine. And Rin goes voluntarily. She's like, yeah, alright, I'll do it. So Elaine gets treated with some of Rin's cells, and pretty quickly, it starts working. She's regaining the use of her arms and her legs, saying things like, I feel great, I feel better than ever. And I was just sitting there like, this is recipe for disaster. I mean, right? Like, normally stuff like this, like, it leads to her health declining even more rapidly and probably dying, like the movie Charlie or something. But, spoiler alert, it just doesn't go that way. Now, she's fine by the end of this season. And another thing you have going on in this second half is that it is revealed that the Siren song ultimately has effects on people's brains. Like, it centers on a certain part of the brains that triggers their fight or flight response, basically making people do what they normally wouldn't do, what they stopped themselves from doing. After Rin donated her stem cells to Elaine, she started going a little ape shit, pretty much reverting to her natural savage instincts. Like she breaks the glass of that water tank and escapes into the woods, and in the heat of the chase, she sings her siren song to Maddie, which snapped Rin out of it, but then the song sent Maddie into insanity pretty much. Like she did all sorts of crazy shit, like throwing random tantrums at her mom and almost kissing Xander. Of course, her biggest thing was just spilling the beans on her polyamorous relationship at that dinner. Like she's kind of tripping balls, and then she looks at Rin, and then she looks at the adults, and she's just like, we're in love, all three of us. And then she kisses Rin, she kisses Ben, and I'm just like, okay, that just happened. I just wanted to slow clap. I just want to be like, way to go, Maddie. Way to go. So if Ben and Rin and Maddie don't do something about this insanity soon, they're gonna end up like Alden Decker from season 1 and just go completely insane and probably kill themselves. So we gotta put a stop to this. So they go underwater in this military submarine thing. I actually thought this scene was really cool. CG, obviously, yeah, but still pretty cool. Because they go to this sacred healing place that Rin said her mother told her about when she was a kid. Whenever in this season we got to see part of the mermaid colony underwater, I always liked that. Because it's the mer people's world, you know? And this healing place, it looked like Avatar and shit. It was all bioluminescent, and they heard like the voices of Rin's ancestors, and it just reminded me of that sacred tree from Avatar. And it turns out that it did the trick. It did pretty much cure them of their insanity, right? Are they all cured, or is there like a little bit left? I don't think there's that much left, if there is any at all. And then there's the last subplot of this season, which is that it is mating season for the mer people. Yeah, time to make babies. But the mer people can't do it in the ocean because the ocean's polluted, and that's affecting their fertility, I guess. So Ben and Maddie decide that they gotta do it on land, the old-fashioned way. And that includes Rin. Yeah, she wants to get pregnant. And you can tell Ben is like, well, can I be the one? I was kind of curious about that myself. I was like, yeah, we can have like another Charles Pownell on our hands. Make more hybrid babies. I don't know where that would go. But ultimately, she decides to bring this new merman on land and try with him, but it's still not working for whatever reason. And then we get to the finale. Now, this finale ultimately had me being like, well, alright. Again, there were things about it I was not a huge fan of. First off, in the episode beforehand, Ian, the reporter from that news station, he gets footage of Rin transforming into a mermaid. So he is on the verge. He's going to expose mermaids to the world. He kidnaps Rin to take to his boss as evidence. Ben and Maddie chase after him, and that results in Ian crashing his car into the ocean with Rin still in his car. So Ben dives in to save them, and he does. He saves both of their lives. And then the next day, it gets out. Ian exposes mermaids to the world, so now Ben, Maddie, and Rin have to go on the run. And then it fast forwards 2 months later. Whenever there's a time jump in anything, like movies included, it always throws me off. I'm like, oh, why'd you do that? Can't we just stay with the story we have? But then I always end up understanding. I'm like, all right, I get it. It's just the story you wanted to tell. So this time jump, 2 months later, now Bristol Cove is just gone to shit. And I actually thought this was awesome. I'm not gonna lie. The military are running the place. Helen is randomly imprisoned with Rick, like Shawshank style. Calvin and Xander get rich by selling a mermaid they caught in the ocean. And Ben, Maddie, and Rin are running to Canada, but the military is right on their ass. So they find them. It's a standoff, and Maddie ends up getting shot. I was like, fuck. And then it turns out that this whole 2 months later segment is all bullshit. It basically did what the season 1 finale of Titans did. It just showed a possible future that could happen if this happened. In this case, if Ben had decided to save Ian's life. And then it goes back to Ben. He's still underwater. He looks at Ian, who's like begging for help. He's like, get me out of the car. I'm gonna drown and die. Rin escapes because she's a mermaid, so she can survive, obviously. And then instead of saving Ian's life, Ben just turns around and swims away and leaves Ian to die. I was like, what the fuck is going on here? You're telling me that all that 2 months later shit is just a possible future that Ben saw in his mind? Oh, man, well, okay. I don't know, I just really like that segment. I was like, this is a bold risk that the show is taking. And then all of a sudden I was just like, no, we're not doing that. Haha, fooled you. So yeah, it turns out that Ben, Rin, and Maddie, they're all fine. Mermaids have not been exposed to the world. Rin still isn't pregnant, but one of those radical girls, Meredith, she is. She got one of the eggs from like when Rin went into the military lab to have a baby done with science. It didn't work out for Rin, but then it turns out that the other egg went to Meredith. So, okay. Now these hybrids are gonna have a full blood of their own. Alright, well, I guess we'll see where that goes. And that's the conclusion of season 2 of Siren. In conclusion, I felt like the first half was more straightforward than the second half. The second half of the season was just so complex. There were so many things going on. I mean, I felt like each scene was important and did contribute to the story, but there was just a lot of story. I guess that's why this season was so long. 16 episodes. That's a lot of TV. I feel like season 3, which has been confirmed actually, this series has been renewed for a 3rd season, it should be less complex. Because it's not that I couldn't keep up with everything that was going on, because I could, but it was all just so overwhelming because it was so much. So much shit going on, like with Elaine and mating season and brain damage. It's like they could have made 2 or 3 seasons out of this. But ultimately, in the end, of course, I still don't regret watching the show. I think it's a badass show about mermaids. I still love the hell out of Rin, and Ben and Maddie are pretty cool too. Ben is gonna have Ian's death on his conscience now, because he did just leave his ass to drown and die. die. If for nothing else, I'm curious to see where that goes next season. So that should be cool. So Siren Season 2, have you watched it? What did you think about it? And which half did you like better? Whatever you think, go ahead and leave a comment. And don't forget to subscribe.